Welcome. You're tuned into Life is a Sacred Journey. Every week, we bring a new perspective to aging and caregiving. Here is your host, Michelle Pope.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the virtual neighborhood of Life is a Sacred Journey. It is my honor and privilege to always be here with you. Hit the share button, let other people know that we have begun our journey this morning, this Friday morning. It is a beautiful, crisp morning in the Bay Area. I was just saying to my daughter and to a good friend, my friend Bonnie, isn't it great to be alive? Even when you wake up with pain and all those kinds of things, when you wake up and you embrace the day and embrace your life, you feel so good. So I hope that you're even moving beyond any arthritis that you may have or any of those kinds of things, and that you enjoy this beautiful day, whether where you are, the weather is stormy, rainy, or whatever. It's a beautiful day because you get to live it and to maybe find out something really incredible about yourself today. So welcome to Life is a Sacred Journey. I am the host of this wonderful podcast that's been going on with the support of Felicia and all of you for a really long time. And so we just thank you. And we ask that you hit the share button and let others know that we have gone live. So I want to tell you about our guest today. I'm very excited that she'll be joining us in a few minutes, but I want to give you a little bit of background about her and let you know about Jennifer Fink. So Jennifer Fink spent the first half of her adult life as a portrait photographer, and she retired from that in 2020. I'm actually going to start admitting Jennifer so that she can hear me announce her this morning. So she's coming in from the virtual green room. Don't you love that? So she retired from being a photographer in 2020, and she was listening to podcasts, her favorite way to learn things while walking her dogs, my favorite beasties in the whole wide world are dogs, and doing her household chores. Her father passed away in March of 2017, and she began the long journey of caregiving, where she began to understand that there was a bigger role that she had to play in her mother's life by caregiving, finding resources. And as you all have said, and I have said, there's a lot of stuff out there, but it's not in one place. And so it's really hard to find. And when you're stressed out, trying to figure out how you're going to do all this, you're like, where do I go? Where do I go? And then the other thing is, there's a lot of not good information out there. I look at a lot of websites and podcasts and I'm like, nah, that's not quite right. Or I don't think that's how you should say it. And I'm not criticizing. I just know from experience of 20 something years here at Alzheimer Services of the East Bay, sometimes the messaging isn't quite right. And if you're a caregiver, you need the messaging of truth. And then you need the messaging of how do I get through this? So Jennifer Fink has created a website that is incredible, actually. I went on it and has all kinds of resources. We're going to figure out how to become a partner here at ASAP. And all of those, just real good resources, including what I love, Jennifer, that you had on your website was you can put your email in and you can get it, to look at the warning signs of a nursing home or a place where you may have to, you may need to look at for respite or even for your loved one to live. So I really appreciate that. You did that. So welcome to Life is a Sacred Journey, Jennifer Fink. All of you, welcome her in the chat and she'll see it later, but do it now so that you can see it later. Good morning, Jennifer. Welcome to Life is a Sacred Journey.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well,
it's definitely been a journey.
I love your background. I know the Alzheimer's Association walk flowers, so that I know those by heart. But I would like for you, if you would, to share your story a little bit, and then we can go into how you develop fading memories. But I always think it's nice to share your story. I believe, if I remember correctly, your mom's name is Diane, and Diane is the reason for this journey of your life where you've kind of gone in another direction. So will you share with the Life is a Sacred Journey family your story?
Certainly. We had a family business together, starting in 1991. Like, I had to go back a little ways there. And, family businesses can be a little challenging as they, pretty typical.
Yeah.
We had a 1 hour photo lab. If you remember back in the 90s, we had film.
Which I still love, by the way.
Yeah, I sometimes miss it, but I sometimes don't. I don't know. That's been a whole other interesting journey.
We'll have to talk about that on another time.
Yeah, for real. So, my mom started having instances where she would take an order from a client. We had one poor gal, again, back in the old days, real estate appraisers would come in and get 3 or 4 copies of each image printed. This one particular gal, she needed the smaller size prints, the 3.5 by 5s. This is like, I swear I'm talking to all the old folks now out there.
I know.
And my mom would take her order, and the way the machines, I don't know if you've ever seen the machines that print photos. There's big, dark black canisters, for lack of a better term, that held the photographic paper. So 90%, 95% of our clients liked 4x6s. So to do somebody's order in a smaller size required changing out that piece of equipment. It wasn't really a big deal. You just needed to plan, right? Okay. So my mom wasn't the most organized person. But she got the job done. And in 95, she started, every so often, she would take this particular gal's order, not write down when the gal came in, when she was coming to pick it up. It was embarrassing. And this problem just kind of continued. My mom was literally 52 and a half. It was very easy to dismiss these instances as, well, she got to chit-chatting, which was her thing. The phone rang, she needed to use the bathroom. Any number of disruptions would easily cause us to, forget. Maybe somebody else hung the order on the wheel. But it got to the point where it happened more frequently, and it all seemed to happen a day or two before her day off when she was more tired, which, of course, we now see in hindsight. But during then, it was just like, oh, just like you weren't sure which person you wanted to strangle first.
Yeah.
To back up half a step, my maternal grandmother had vascular dementia. So my mom was also kind of dealing with that. And just for your audience's knowledge, my maternal great-grandmother also had dementia. So yay me for a great family history.
Oh, Jennifer.
Yeah. A lot of people ask me if I'm afraid of getting the disease, and the answer is no, but we can go into that later.
Yeah.
So in the early 2000s, it became very obvious that my mom was having issues. And I began to, I hope serendipitous, too early in the morning for that word. I would go, if I heard her basically shooting the breeze with a client, I would go out and be like, oh, so, what are we doing, for Stacy today? And I would insert myself into the conversation so that I wouldn't find a surprise, a day or two later and have to call the client and say, can you explain the order to me? Because, of course, it's much more difficult over the phone.
Yes, yes.
So one day, and I didn't actually realize this until just a few years ago. So we had employees, they would bust their tails to get all the orders printed. We also did portraits. So get all the orders printed and get them bagged up and get them done. But they never split the 5x7s or punched out the wallet. So everything was on the sheets. And that's not how we delivered stuff. And it drove my mother straight up the wall. And now I realize why they did that. They were doing the hard tasks so they could leave the easy stuff for her. And I don't know, they never said anything. Yeah. So anyway, there was one day I was going through all the orders, and lo and behold, here's an order, photographs in a work envelope. No, I think it had the woman's first and last name. I'm not even sure it had her phone number, which obviously is necessary. And out of frustration and lack of understanding at that point, I said, "What are we doing with this order?" My mom glanced at it, goes, "Oh, that's employees' handwriting. I don't know anything about that." And I was like, "Oh, bleep." Because employees' handwriting was very loopy. Mom's was very angular. There is no way you would mistake those. And I thought, oh boy, here we go. And so I told her at the time, I said, I'm really starting to be getting concerned because, you used to have daffy moments, every once or twice a week. You seem to be having them more daily. And I'm kind of concerned. And she looks at me, she says, "Well, I don't want to end up like my mother," and turned on her heel and stomped out. And I thought, well, heck, let me see. You're going to either end up like your mother or I'm going to have to kill you. These are not good choices. Murder is illegal. I don't want to go to jail. I still have a daughter. So it was just like, I don't know. I mean, obviously she was afraid. Yeah. She knew what was going on. And at some point, I think she went from knowing that something was wrong to not knowing. But that transition was almost invisible because it seemed to me like she was in denial for years and years and years. But now I know better. Okay. So my dad had he had diabetes. He died in 2017 of kidney failure. And it became very obvious that my mom was actually worse than, I knew she was bad. But because my dad was a buffer when I visited and went and tried to help, it wasn't quite as painful dealing with her as it was when it was just the two of us. So I go searching for information. I would go visit her and, she would say, "What have you been up to lately?" Because shooting the breeze is what she wanted to do, which that would have been fine if we could have had any kind of conversation. Mm-hmm. So she would ask me, what have you been up to lately? And I would tell her, "Oh, it's Monday. I went to the gym, again, back in the old days."
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And then she'd ask me again. I'd say, "Well, it's Monday. I went to Rotary." Okay. And then she'd ask me again. "I went to Rotary and so-and-so spoke on whatever topic, Alzheimer's." And then she'd ask me again. I'm like, "Well, it's Monday. I came to visit you." "Oh, okay." And then she'd ask me again. I'd put the whole day together. And so this is now about 20 minutes into my visit. I've now given her all the answers I've got. Many people said, "Well, she won't understand, just make stuff up." And I'm like, this is my mother, You don't lie to your mother. You don't just, that just didn't feel right. So I started researching. I was reading books. I love to read. I actually just finished one at breakfast this morning. And first off, a lot of those books back then, so this was 2017, like I said, they were heavy. They were hard to read.
Yeah.
And I was doing deep internet research because all of the standard advice, simplify activities they used to love, bring the old family photo album, bring your mom's wedding album. None of that advice worked. My mom was very creative, tried simplifying activities. All she did was stress about doing it wrong. Oh. Talk about not relaxing or enjoyable. Mm-hmm. I brought a photo album or scrapbook that my sister had put together of the two of us as kids. Now, I'm blonde. My sister is dark brown hair, chocolate brown eyes, olive complexion, tans with the minimum of sunlight. Not me. So we have some similarities in facial in features, mm-hmm. but we have to point them out. Till we point them out, you have zero idea we're related. So that should explain to you how very different we look. Yeah. My mom didn't even recognize the younger version of herself. Didn't recognize either one of these two children. And we're talking, my sister was like 4 or 5. So,
oh, wow. Okay.
I'm trying to think how old she was in 2017. Oh, she's 52 now. So you guys can do the math. Too early for math for me. So it's like, all this advice that, well, they remember the past better than current stuff, and it was just all painful. Yeah. So one day, again, old days, I was driving to the gym and I'm like, duh, I need to look for a podcast on caregiving because there's podcasts on everything. So I'm sure I'll find some podcasts on caregiving. And this was fall of 2017. There was one podcast on caregiving.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, well, there's one, so that's fine. And I listened to it, and it wasn't my cup of tea. No criticisms, but we can't all like the same thing.
That's
And I
right.
thought, I can't be the only person taking care of a parent, trying to run a household, trying to run a business, does not have time to read every book they can get their hands on, which back then was even harder because, Apple Books didn't have all these
That's
Alzheimer's
right.
books.
That's right.
And so my husband's a real estate broker back when podcasts were new, which was like the 2011 thereabouts.
Pretty
We
good.
talked about doing one for his business, but it never happened. So I'm like, I can't be the only person that needs a different flavor of podcast for caregivers. So I started my own. And now it's been almost 5 years. I can't believe it.
And it's titled Fading Memories.
Mm-hmm. There's actually a funny story behind that. So there was an incident at the memory care residence where my mom lived. There was a resident there, sweetest old lady. Because my mom was when my mom moved in, she was 74. So she wasn't as old as some of the other residents.
Okay.
There's this one gal, sweetest gal, but holy Toledo, complete and total kleptomaniac. If she put her eyes on something, it was hers. And I'm only 5'2". She was shorter than me. But man, you did not want to fight that woman for your purse. And that happened to me one day. I saw her come in and I grabbed my purse. She grabbed it. She goes, "That's mine." And I'm like, I'm about to have tug of war with this gal over my purse. And I was afraid of hurting her or, it's like all these things were going through my head. Well, one day this gal decided my mom's dog was hers.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. And so my mom's dog weighed literally double what she should have weighed. And so the executive director and the caregivers and I had put together a plan because being that overweight caused some other yucky issues I'm not going to discuss this hour of the morning. And so I'm literally trying to shove this 28-pound miniature poodle into my mom's room right before meal. And, Ms. Klepto did not like this. And she grabbed my mom's forearm and said, "Make her stop." And that's my dog, make her stop. And my mom's like, "That's my dog." And all I hear behind me is these two little ladies about to go to blows. And my mom goes, "If you grab me one more time, I'm going to knock your block off." And I thought, oh my God, don't be this. Thankfully, she was literally standing by the door to the courtyard. And I just literally shoved my mom out into the courtyard. And she was so angry, she was shaking. And this is sometimes where a little bit of memory loss is a good thing. And I just kept saying, "It's so terrible. Her mind is so bad. And she likes Misty so much. She thinks Misty's hers. And oh, it's so terrible. Her mind is bad." And I just kept, it was like a stupid parrot. I just kept repeating things for about 3 minutes. And she looks in the window and goes, "Oh, it looks like it's dinner time." I was like, oh, thank God. So I'd had a past photography client who is a business coach. And I put this story on Facebook and she goes, "You should write a book." And I said, "I'm kind of thinking about it, but I'll probably wait till after Mom's gone." And I said, "I think I might call it As the Memory Fades." Now, I'm not a soap opera watcher, but some people probably can catch the reference.
Yeah.
So when I started the podcast and you get this little, 1.5-inch square artwork, well, As the Memory Fades is way too much text on this little tiny thing. So that's how it became Fading Memories.
I love that. Well, and have you, in your learning experience, realized also, as I definitely have, the diversity of how each individual manifests their dementia, whether it be Alzheimer's, stroke. I just think that when we use that term, people, and I'm going to use snapshot, one reflection of what that means. And so, have you found that in doing your research and filling up the content for your podcast?
Well, yeah, when you do a episode every single week, you kind of think, well, I must be running out of topics, right? And we do circle back with other people, like we've done financial abuse and legal type stuff. And then we circle back and everybody has their own, I don't want to say spin, but their own experiences that speak to the different topics. But yeah, everybody's story is similar, but yet unique. And I have one upcoming at the end of this month, February. It's like I got to remember what month it is. It's a young gal, started taking care of her mom when she was 26. She's 34 now. And, I had my own journey with trying to navigate what was going on with mom while also trying to maintain the business and not let all the clients know that my mom was losing her marbles because that didn't seem right. Mm-hmm. And, this gal was a long distance caregiver for 4 years, and then she moved back home. And it's like our moms have similar medical paths, but not the same.
Right.
And so I like to throw in, stories, people's just specific stories that aren't necessarily advice, and other people who have more advice. So I find the brain absolutely fascinating. I frequently say, if I was half my age and had twice the aptitude for science, I'd go into brain research because I just think it's the most fascinating thing. We got all kinds of stuff going on in space, and that's really interesting. But the final frontier is right here in our minds. When they figure out whatever it is they need to figure out about our brains, it's just going to be a whole different trajectory for the human race. I probably won't be around then, but that's okay.
Well, and I think that we'll look at it from a different perspective, because now we have people who are being diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And at one point we said it was folks only over the age of 65. And so now we're realizing that no, we have early onset Alzheimer's, mild cognitive impairment. All these people are much younger. And so I also think, Jennifer, looking at the environment and is something that we really need to do. And I wish, there's more research being done now, but it's just starting when you look at the environment and our exposures to things throughout our life continuum and where people live. As I begin to see where people live and where people don't have Alzheimer's or dementia, it's definitely not here where I live in California. So yeah, it's interesting when you begin to, like you say, read books and delve into the neuroscience of it all. You begin to realize we know very little.
That is very true. And I say often, I don't think modern life is all that great for our brains. We're stressed. We have air pollution. We have overly processed foods. Even the food that isn't overly processed is, our corporate agriculture. Not sure that's the best. I mean, we know it's not great for the animals, but I don't think it's necessarily good for us either.
Right.
What else we got going? We got a lot more light pollution, so it's not as dark when we're sleeping.
Right.
We're just, and since the pandemic, I mean, I swear this country has just got a mental health issue, and it's causing all kinds of other issues. And it's like, I'm glad that talking about mental health is becoming less taboo, because I think that's highly important.
Yes.
But, we got cell phones and, things happening all the time. And it's just like, I don't think our brains have time to just like process and rest. And it's just insane. So,
and when you think about even people with dementia, our multidisciplinary team was meeting yesterday, and we were talking about an individual that is overstimulated in our program, and that's our pride and joy. We keep everybody engaged. There's a lot going on that they can choose, and for him, no. It's way too much. So again, you build a model, and you're thankful that it fits some people, but out of hundreds and hundreds of people where it's working, this one person, we don't think it's going to ever work, because we also don't want to medicate him to death, where you just medicate him and he's sitting there and it's like, yeah, he's having fun. No, he's not, so, and we want people to be able to get up and move around and feel a sense of a connection with the environment. So I think environment is extremely important. I love what you said about sleep, because I just recently, 5 years ago, I was having insomnia really bad. And I realized that my bedroom was overstimulating. I had television in there. I mean, it was like, okay, is it your bedroom or your living room? And I read something that said, turn it into a place of sleep where you are just going in there to go to sleep. And wow, what a difference it made. Took the television out, not so much stimulus in there with decorations. It's not ugly, but it's not decorated, and it made such a difference, and having a schedule went to, all those things. But nobody teaches us this. We find these things out because we end up with a problem.
When they talk about things like, well, don't have the TV in your bedroom. It's like, I discovered many years ago that the melodic tones of speaking voices knocks me the heck out. Like, I cannot stand white noise. We were just discussing this last night with my husband. We have a wood burning stove, and it has a fan. And a friend of ours was like, well, you should turn it on auto so that when the stove is a certain temperature, like if it gets too cold, it'll turn off, and put it on low. Well, that's fine during the day. But if I want to sit there and listen to the TV in the evening, I don't want to listen to this. And I was telling him, I'm like, I don't mind the sound of rain for about an hour, and then I want to turn it off. And the same with the ocean. The ocean is beautiful, and I love the sound. I don't want to listen to it for 24 hours. It drives me straight up the wall. So, but
that's the uniqueness. That's the uniqueness of each of us, right?
Well, so the speaking voice puts me to sleep, and I found if I fell asleep in front of the TV, because we had one in our bedroom in our old home, and then I went to bed, then it was like, well, now I need to turn the TV back on for these voices. And you had to turn the TV on, like those sleep timers so that it wouldn't run all night. Well, now I just listen to, there's a couple podcasts I listen to that are specific for sleep, but they're somewhat meditative, but they're telling stories, but they're like stories with almost no action. It's very interesting.
Oh, that's interesting. I've never heard of those. Okay.
Yeah, there's the one I really like is called Nothing Much Happens. And she writes and reads all the stories, and she repeats it twice. The second time she repeats it slower. The only reason I know that is because she says it at the beginning of the show. I have never, ever heard the entire story.
Oh, okay. So Nothing Much Happens. For all of you out there that, unlike me, who can listen to all those white noise things, and that you have. I love this. Nothing Much Happens. And then you haven't heard it all the way to the end because you've been asleep. I love that.
And I kind of figure those are a little bit better than the true crime podcast because I am a little bit conscious of what I'm putting into my brain while I'm sleeping. But we moved from your area. So I lived in Contra Costa County for 55 years.
Oh.
And end of December 21, we moved to the Sacramento area up in the very low level foothills of the Sierras.
Oh, wow.
And holy Toledo, is it dark up here?
Yeah.
We don't have street lights. That was a funny story. I went out to my husband was going to get stuff out of the mailboxes, which is across the street and up one house width, basically. And he ended up with a phone call. I was expecting a package. So I was like, oh, forget it. I'll go. I get to the end of my driveway and it was like, okay, well, I know where the mailbox is. And I literally could not find the mailbox because it was so dark.
Right.
And that's the same thing. We have a skylight in our bathroom, the primary bathroom. And it's very bizarre when there's a full moon because it's like, where's that light coming from? Oh, yeah, it's a full moon. Otherwise, man, it is pitch black and getting from the bed to the toilet can be a challenge.
That's where the night lights, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we don't even have those because we're very conscious about not having light disrupt your sleep. And the way that all these houses up here are custom built, and ours was built in 1988, so it's funky. It's funky. My kitchen is literally a triangle.
Oh, okay.
It's bizarre. It needs some serious help. But the bathroom is also dog-legged shaped, and it's got, way more mirror than it needs. And I'm afraid if there even a low-level nightlight would be like, shining in the mirror, waking up the neighbors.
It's like a beacon.
Yeah. So I put one hand on the dresser, then one hand on the end of the bed, and then it's like 3 steps from the carpet to the wood floor. And, by then the even on a non-full moon night, there's enough light coming through that you could see. But man, it took quite a while to get used to being able to traverse to the bathroom in the pitch black.
Well, just even moving from a urban, area, which I did, to a place that a lot of people probably consider urban. I don't, because I moved from a big city. The reality is you all of a sudden have to get used to, oh, wait a minute, there's no noise after 10 o'clock. Where'd the people go? It's just a different way of living. And I think that's also good for people as they age in place and in their communities, that noise is something that can be very overstimulating for people, as well, as you've outlined. I think the daycare center up the street is close enough where we can hear them playing, or the participants in the program can hear them playing, but not like I can hear them where my office is, where I can hear them screaming and crying and everything, because I think that would create issues where they would want to go and help, try to figure out what's going on, because boy, they get into fights. They're like 4 years old, 3 and 4, and they fight all the time. I'm like, stop fighting, and they're like, give it to me, So for people with dementia in a confined space, I'm gonna call it a confined space in the building, and hearing that so perfectly, they would probably be looking around trying to figure out how they can help or where it's coming from.
Or make it stop.
Or make it stop. You said earlier in the podcast that, going on this journey to try to just really learn and want to meet your mom, Diane, and figure out how to keep communicating with her and making the right choices for you and your family and your caregiving journey. Where are you now? Where are things now that you kind of have learned some things, how to access information? Where are you now?
Well, my mom passed away March 31st, 2020.
Okay.
That is a whole other story. Losing somebody at the start of the pandemic, not having your traditional grief process and the what's that right word? But the things that go around, like literally when my dad died, we got flowers and cards and meals and condolences and phone calls and emails and Facebook posts, blah, blah, blah. It was almost too much.
Yeah.
With my mom, literally one family, they called him, said, hubby was like slow roasting. I think it was ribs or something. They were bringing us food. Great. And one card, and that was it. And it was kind of like, well, I can't, complain because, this is kind of a good thing. She had fallen and broken her leg. And I'm not kidding. The fee for her care was going up from $5,600 to $7,200. She was going to be bedbound because we didn't repair the leg because she wouldn't cooperate with the physical therapist. And, I wasn't really sure that anesthesia was a good idea. So there's just like a whole lot of things going on. I'm not kidding. I think she must have had a moment of clarity where she said, I'm bedbound or wheelchair bound. There's this virus thing going on. I'm not going to be able to see children because that's what we did for entertainment. And this price they're paying for me to live here is ridiculous. I'm out, because that fee was supposed to take over April 1st. My mom died March 31st. So it's like, I think she had one last moment of clarity and just decided, that's it. I'm done with this nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
But
wow. When you think about it, because I'm one of those people that ponders that kind of stuff, I believe what you said is right on. The lack of awareness that we think an individual has just because they can't connect with us where we are, I think that's really short-sighted.
Well, and so of course, now we're all sitting at home going, what the heck? And I have had a lot of guests from the Alz authors. I hope you're familiar with them. Okay.
Yeah.
So I went from not a very busy schedule to overwhelmed because all of their little book tours and all the things they did to promote their books was obviously shut down. And I hadn't had time to figure out what I was going to do. Like, what am I going to do after mom's gone? I'm going to continue doing the podcast. She had just turned 77. I figured we'd had, till her early 80s. I figured she'd at least get to 80. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, well, I don't have anything else to do. I'm not doing people's portraits. So I kept doing the podcast. And one of the things I like to tell people is if I am still learning new things from guests, then I know you're getting good information. So, we downsized our life to fit into the lowest level of income that self-employed people get, which wasn't easy, but we did. Yeah. And, so I'm like, okay, well, I'll just keep doing this until I find something else that, is meaningful and occupies my time. Cause I'm only 56. So it's a little too early to, hang up the working part of my life.
Yeah. Yeah. And to feel, like you're giving as well as receiving, I think that's why we started to do this. And it's sort of like we're giving, and it was the pandemic that put us in this iteration of life is a sacred journey. And it was because we wanted to get information out about the disease, as well as symptoms, as well as we had, like you, professionals that came on to tell us what are the vaccines all about, and a lot of older people were nervous because we were only hearing about older folks that were being hospitalized and dying from it at that particular time. So that was the primary reason. And then as your podcast, other people have come along beside us and said, we want to help you, or we want to be a part, or let's do something together. And it's an amazing thing that can happen in the podcast world. I see that on your website and in your podcast too, that, you've connected with probably people you probably never thought that you would.
No, I've had guests as far away as Israel and the Netherlands, which for those who are time challenged like myself, Israel is 10 hours ahead of us in California. So I have to don the half outfit like I'm wearing today. And let's see, the Netherlands, I think they were 8 or 9. I've done several interviews with people in the UK. One challenge was with a author duo. The name of their book is Slow Puncture. So one of the authors has dementia. He's a cyclist. And when he's riding his bike, you would never know. And so she said, well, Peter is better earlier in the day. And I'm like, well, that presents a small problem because earlier in the day is the middle of the night. And I said, I can do this at 8 o'clock in the morning. I probably will have my tea with me. I think that was like really the very end of his good time of day. So, it all went on fine, but it's like, sometimes people don't realize what goes on behind the scenes.
Right.
And the 2 people from Israel are Americans that are living there and have been living there. So it's just, it's like without Zoom, which I started using in 2018, and the pandemic, which taught everybody what Zoom was and how to use it easily. That was the best part about the pandemic, because many of my guests are in their 70s and 80s, and, technology is not something that they're super comfortable with. I had one gal that, she referred to herself as a tech klutz, which I thought was a beautiful way of putting it. And we had challenges the first time we got on Zoom, which was frustrating as heck for me and her. But then when we did the recording, she had it all dialed in. But I have not had that problem since the pandemic. So,
well,
small favors.
It's small favors. And I always say I should have bought some stock in Zoom before I'd be wealthy right now, and I could donate a lot of money to a lot of things that mean a lot to me. So tell me about Misty.
Misty the dog.
Relationship with your mom, Diane. It sounds like Misty was key to some of her, for her.
Yeah, well, my mom, okay, so this was one of my mom's favorite repetitive stories. She'd had dogs all her life. When my parents got married, they basically had black miniature poodles, predominantly female ones. They had at least 2 males that I know of. I don't think they had any others, because before I came along, they were doing some showing of the poodles, which is like, that's an expensive hobby. It sucks up your whole weekend. It's just like, it's probably like, my daughter never got into dance, but like, I am so glad she wasn't into sports and stuff, because when my sister and I were younger, we were on swim team and softball. She was on softball, I was on swim team, and my dad still photographed weddings on the weekend and worked full time with AT&T and still managed to go to our events. So it didn't suck up the family's entire time, which I got a big problem with, but that's a whole other show. So my mom's repetitive story was, I've had dogs all my life. And when I was pregnant with my first one, my mother-in-law said, well, now that you're having a baby, you're going to get rid of the dogs, right? My mother actually repeated that in front of my grandmother, which was like, I have never wanted to launch across the table and body slam somebody into the floor any harder. I'm not entirely sure that my grandmother heard it. She probably did and probably just tuned it out. But it was, and she would say that all the time. She'd come to my house. I have golden retrievers, and she would literally launch into that story. So I learned after my dad was gone how to deflect that, because I'm like, it's been almost 3 years since she passed away. I still don't need to hear that story. So one day I asked her, I said, she started it on the story because we were at the dog park. So I knew it was coming. And she said, she starts it on the story. And I said, that's right. You have had dogs forever. What were their names? And she said, well, we started with Misty, and we liked that name so much, we just gave all the dogs that name. And I said, oh, that's pretty interesting. And in my head, I'm going, and completely baloney. So, one of the reasons, and I've told people this, so my sister and I don't agree on anything. We had a plan for what we would do with mom after she passed away. Her younger sister is 11 years younger than mom was, and she took care of our grandmother for the last, I don't remember how many years of her life. And I don't know why my family decided this was smart, because it wasn't. My aunt and my grandmother lived on grandma's Social Security. So it doesn't take two brain cells rubbing together to figure out what happened to my aunt financially. Yeah. She's on welfare, senior housing, supplement. And she's got some of her own mental health struggles. She's also a recovering alcoholic. But we felt, surprisingly, that it would be beneficial if she lived with my mom. We had a caregiver during the day, so my aunt wasn't responsible 24/7. And, that seemed like a good solution for a myriad of problems. And then me being me, I start thinking about all the what ifs. Well, the likelihood that my mom would die first was strong. She's 11 years older and had Alzheimer's. Then what? Would Auntie be willing to let, maybe one or two other older women move into this, 4-bedroom home? What if she didn't? It was going to take time to get back on, subsidized housing. And I was like, I don't know that I want to deal with this. So I went searching for a memory care residence. And there was one literally a mile down the house from my home. I knew it wasn't up to par. I went to the next nearest one, toured it, liked what they said, knew in the back of my head that it was a salesperson I was talking to. I did talk to the executive director briefly. I got to observe him dealing with residents, family members of residents, and staff. And I'm like, I would not want that man's job. And so I'm just like, I'm getting a good vibe here. And so I said, my mom has this dog. And they're like, well, we could probably, figure out how she can keep her dog. And I literally pretty much chucked money at them. I did not do research. I didn't check if they had any, complaints with the state. I didn't look at Google reviews. They said she could keep her dog. I'm like, here's money. Boom.
Thank you. Yeah.
Not necessarily the best way, but thankfully it worked out great. My gut instinct was right. But she had Misty the first half. She lived there 3 years. She had Misty for 18 months. Oh. And my sister and I started struggling with, the dog was more of a accessory. And there was a lot of times, like, because poodles aren't very tall unless you get a standard. She would literally jump up, and I don't know how this dog did this, literally weighing twice her body weight, would jump up and down trying to get my mom's attention. And my mom would be like, it was annoying.
Okay.
And we were like, is it time to rehome the dog? Blah, blah, blah. My dogs hated Misty. So the dog wasn't coming to live in my house. My sister already had 2 dogs and she took mom's cat. So her stable was full. And we were just kind of like, at what point is it going to be the time? Which is not a fun, thought process. Well, what happened was the community they renovated the entire community and they put new carpet down everywhere, but they were also putting in memory care. And the executive director, sweetest guy, never asked me to rehome the dog, but pointed out that they had frequent problems with Misty peeing on the rug. That's why we were paying an extra maintenance fee. And that, they were putting in new carpet. And I mean, that man beat around the bush is so hard. And I'm like, so you're asking me to rehome the dog? And he's like, well, he literally never accepted those words, but that's what we did. When you buy a dog from a breeder, you technically co-own them. And so I basically browbeat the owner, the breeder, to take her back. Okay. And I was actually just thinking about Misty the other day. Unfortunately, our youngest golden retriever, who's only 5.5, has cancer. Oh, wow. And this is a typical problem with golden retrievers. I've had 6, 3 of them will have died from cancer. So not great odds. Yeah. And I was like, how old would Misty be right now? Okay, she was a year younger than my oldest, who died in 2020. He was 13, which would have made her 12 in 2020. I'm like, oh yeah, Misty's probably gone. Yeah. That was my only negative feeling, is like, I kind of wish the breeder had let us know. They took her back to the breeder's grandkids who had a farm in Oregon. So I'm pretty sure Misty had a good end to her life, probably got skinny, I hope.
But you raised something really, because families have asked me here, do we have pet therapy? And I always say yes, because I bring my Chihuahua Jack Russell Terrier mix to the program. But I always say to them, only for a short period, because they love holding her, they love petting her. But after a while, she wants to move around and they want to, and that's not going to work. That doesn't work. Even though she's been trained for the environment and everything, she's still a dog. And so you raise that point. And a lot of times people will say, yeah, my mom wants to take her dog to this assisted living or this nursing home and they won't let. And I always say, well, but it's more to it than your dog coming into your life where it is a pet, where you can walk it, talk to it, and you're not sure whether your loved one will be able to do that. And the dog needs that in order to thrive.
Yeah, Misty seemed to get a lot more schizophrenic in memory care. And I think because there wasn't an alpha in charge. Like right. Misty could look at my mom and bat her little brown eyes, and my mom would feed her. And the reason that the staff and I worked together to keep Misty from being fed by the residents is because there were residents literally rolling up like hot dogs or parts of sandwiches, parts of their meal to feed to this poor dog. Now, a miniature poodle should weigh about 15 pounds. Misty weighed 28.
Yeah, that's
and when you can't do your bodily hygiene as a dog, it gets nasty.
Yep.
And so none of us wanted to deal with nasty. So we were literally we tried everything, but my mom just didn't cooperate. And the dog, what happened is we'd lock the dog in mom's room during meals and she would scream and howl like, a hellhound. Like I have never heard a poodle scream and carry on like that.
Okay. Well, because she got used to being able to access so much food and that became a habit. Yeah.
Yep. And she just didn't seem happy. I mean, she was, but she just, I don't know. It's like, if you've had dogs as long as I have, she just didn't seem psychologically balanced. And, that's when we started thinking, is she a hindrance with mom? Is she more trouble than benefit? And, we were weighing that when they renovated the entire community and took that decision out of our hands, which was kind of nice. But
Yeah,
You know,
we use the animatronic animals here too. Those work really well because again, once the loved one is tired of petting them, they just stop. It ends. The interaction ends, and so I'm so thankful to you, Jennifer, for coming to Life is a Sacred Journey. I want to remind our folks out there that Jennifer has lived this experience as a daughter, a granddaughter, a great granddaughter of women who have suffered from Alzheimer's or cognitive impairment. She said early on, and I'm going to ask her as we close out our time together, that, you know, a lot of people ask her, you know, are you worried? Are you afraid? I wasn't going to ask you that, but since it's come up, I'm going to ask, because I don't think you are. So I'm going to ask you, why not? Not why not, but just tell us why you're not.
okay. Well, let's see. So a decade ago, a little bit more than a decade ago, I had a client. I was seriously overweight. Again, 5'2". I weighed over 250 pounds. Not good.
Yeah.
My dad's side of the family, which I take after, that is where the fat gene comes from. Thank you very much. He has a lot of diabetics in his family. His dad, his brothers, my dad, cousins, but they were all male. So I was talking to this client who happened to be a doctor. She said, you're overweight. You have a family history of diabetes. You're screwed. And I thought, I will show you. She threw the gauntlet down with that phrase. And I'm like, I'm going to do whatever I need to do. I will find the path to lose this weight and keep it off forever. And I did. It wasn't super easy and it took 2 years, but I did it specifically to avoid becoming diabetic. And in that journey, I also learned that I was protecting my brain from lots of diseases. So then dealing with my mom and learning about Alzheimer's and doing this podcast, I've realized, how managing your stress is important, getting proper sleep is important, communing with nature, having a feeling of purpose. There's just so much that goes into cognitive health. And my husband and I, embrace it very fully because it was hard enough at the brief amount of time that my mom and my grandmother overlapped that it was just like, thank you, no. And, to be perfectly honest, this country and this society and, the UK as well, we're not set up to take care of people with these kind of diseases. We dump them on family members, pat the family members on the shoulder and say, good luck. And then we hightail it out of there because we don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
And one of my biggest soapboxes I stand on is that family caregivers donate billions, almost $1 trillion worth of care, free health care.
Yep.
Because it's our loved one. We care. We want to do the best job for them. But because we're donating all this free stuff, why would anybody pay for this?
Right.
Like, why would they say, oh, I'm sorry. Hey, Jennifer, I know this is really hard for you to run your business and take care of let me take over something. Yeah, no, that ain't happening. That's just not the way this country is wired. We need to change it. And I don't think it'll change. I tell a lot of people, my paternal grandmother lived to 103. Her mind was fine. And that's my goal. So I got 47 years to go. And I still don't think that's going to change a whole lot in 47 years. So we have to do everything we can to preserve our cognitive health. And like I said, I really think that modern life is not helpful.
No.
And I've noticed, so we're both in California. We spent, 5 weeks swimming upstream in the rain.
Boy.
And there was a day when it was just like, I don't want to do anything. I feel like, the grumpy is sitting on my head. I look outside and now where we live is above the fog, but below the snow. So sometimes it's raining and it's still sunny out, which I never got 55 years. So it's weird, but I like it. If I got to put up with rain and it's sunny, it's okay. It's just weird.
Yes.
And I was like, I got to get outside, but I am not going outside in this atmospheric river. And it really took a toll. So whenever I start feeling kind of, like yesterday, I took the dogs for a big walk. The youngest one is still kicking.
Yep.
he's doing things his own way. So, I really kind of tune into if I'm having like negative feelings is like, why? Am I stressing myself out because I'm trying to do too much stuff for the podcast? Have I not been outside because it's been raining for 5 weeks?
Right.
Or it's cold. I don't like cold either. So
exactly. That's
it's just and worrying about getting Alzheimer's is not going to help prevent getting Alzheimer's.
That's right.
That's my thing.
Well, but you've decided to live your life. That's, every time they come up with, what if there was a cure? What if you could get a test and find out if you were going to, I always say to people, not discouraging them, but to say there's a balance to that. If we had something that would tell me now at my age, at 65, that I had the probability of Alzheimer's, that's the word probability would get in the way for me, because it would be like, okay, if I live another 20 years and there's a probability, but nothing happens, and I'm living in that 20-year right now, I don't think that would be life-giving. I don't think that would help me to, to, like you say, do all the things. I believe that all these things that you spoke about, sleep, managing your stress, having a life of purpose, doing things that are different. I know I see that you had a career, then you have another something, and then you're like, I may do something else. I don't know, but Jennifer's talking about, you guys, living it like today is it, and when you do that, then you don't take a whole lot of time living in the negative nebulae, and we all have to go there from time to time, because that's life, right?
Yep.
But staying there is where things get, you don't give yourself enough time, your brain enough time to heal from the stress of the commute or the stress of the loss of a loved one. I send my condolences to you, Jennifer, for the loss of your mom. I know it's been a while, but grief is one of those things that I know. I lost my brother during the pandemic. It just keeps coming back, and I do believe. I thank you for saying. I believe it was because we couldn't do and I was trying to think of the word when you were speaking. We couldn't do the rituals of death that we normally would have planned and done and ran around and done. And there's just not been the closure that I've needed to move on a little quicker. And I may never move on from it. And it gets better with every day, but still, there's something about this pandemic, and as you said, the end of life celebrations that could not happen in the way that we're used to saying goodbye to our loved ones. I think the mental health impact of that is great.
I disagree. I totally agree. Jeez.
That's all right. Yeah, no. But yeah, and then like you said, all the other stuff that's going on that creates all these mental health challenges, and then the resources for that. We could start a podcast that would go on forever about mental health resources and helping people.
Yeah, I'm just glad I see a lot more conversations about it. There's a YouTuber that I follow. He does like 1-minute shorts every day. He's a loss prevention guy. And so he talks about, it's basically his thing. I don't know the name of his channel, but he refers to his audience as the petty squad. Okay. And so he tells all these petty stories, and they're funny, but sometimes, there's a mental, from what he said that he's had his own struggles. And so sometimes, he just has a positive message to share. And it's like, and it's interesting because it comes from a person that I probably wouldn't interact with normally. I mean, he's in a different part of the country, different kind of demographic, but, still got benefits to get from everybody. So that's one thing I really appreciate with this kind of platform is that, I get to talk to so many people. And I do have an upcoming guest who has had mild cognitive impairment for at least a decade.
Wow.
And he's doing really well. He actually does really beautiful woodworking. It's a hobby he took up after the diagnosis. I deal with it. His wife's been on the show a couple times, and she's just so much fun. And so I asked about him one day, and so we're going to talk about how they've navigated this, because usually in a decade, mild cognitive impairment turns into something worse.
Yeah.
He seems to be okay, and he was, I think, 50. Their son was in middle school, and their son graduated from law school last year. No, 21. It all blurs together.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a very interesting conversation. And I hope my goal is to inspire people like, yes, we might have like a horrible family history like mine, or maybe you were diagnosed with MCI, or you just, have a difficult time not living in fear of having this disease. So that's the goal, is to like share the positive things that they've done that they think have helped him.
Okay.
And we haven't recorded that one yet, so I don't know. I don't exactly know what we're going to talk about.
When does your podcast drop for everybody to access?
Every single Tuesday.
Okay.
And I'm trying to figure out, and I'll probably do it anyway, but July 4th, 2023 is a Tuesday. And it's like, well, do I put a show out that day? Yes, I will. Because people I was talking to my husband about, I had an episode on therapies, occupational therapy, speech therapy, all those things. I thought that was baloney for somebody like my mom.
Mm-hmm.
Because of this gal's Instagram page, I learned that maybe I was wrong. So when she asked if she could be on the show, I said, yes, but you're going to change my mind. And she did. And that week, the downloads were average-ish.
Mm-hmm.
And the next week we were talking about end of life conversations that we need to have. And the downloads were higher. So I went back to look at what was different.
Yeah.
And there was in 3 days, 60 episodes had been downloaded. So it wasn't necessarily the topic. It was just the following week, people were getting caught up. So it's
a hard balance. We're constantly trying to figure out, how to balance it all and who and what is listening. But then I realized that it's always down the road when we do the numbers and we look a month later, it's gone to places that I never could have imagined, and people have picked it up and used it or whatever. So Jennifer, keep doing what you're doing. Your podcast is amazing. I had a chance to look at some of them, and your website is beautiful, and just your story about being, caring for your mom, but also that it became the catalyst and the muse for what you're doing today is just a beautiful story. So thank you for sharing it with us.
You're welcome. Well, thank you for inviting me on. And I'm going to shout out one last thing. And it gave me another to-do list item. I did a live broadcast with a company called Tombot. They really need a different name. They're developing the first robotic medical grade dog. And you have to see these robot dogs in action, even over a screen. You will fall in love with these crazy little robots. Even the one they're testing one that doesn't have the fur and the cosmetics, as they call it. I don't have that on my website, but it's on my YouTube channel, but I'm going to attach it to the website.
Oh, I'll have to check them out.
Yeah. So it's Tom Stevens of Tombot. The dog's name is Jenny, which we thought was funny because that was my nickname when I was a kid. And I'm just fascinated how, one, his story is really interesting as to why he started this company. And it blows me away that I'm learning about new treatments, new theories, new products, new this, new that. It's like at some point we're all going to come together under one umbrella, but right now
we're going to have to try to help them to do that. So I want to thank Jennifer Fink for joining us this morning on Life is a Sacred Journey. I want to thank all of you for coming. Also to remind you that if you are a person out there in the community living with depression and suicide thoughts, 988 is the suicide hotline. We end our podcast every week with that. So know that your life matters. Know that this moment you can get through it with some support and help. And there are folks at 988 that are willing to listen and to help you through and find resources to help you through this dark, dark time in your life. That you're not alone. So thank you, Life is a Sacred Journey family. Hug a tree, hug a cat, pet a dog, pet a cat, pet them both, and hug yourself, because you are great. And if you're caregiving, you're not alone. You can go to Jennifer Fink's website. You can go to her podcast. You can keep coming back here. We will make sure that you know that you are doing something that is magnificent. Caregiving is a heavy lift. So have a wonderful weekend. Jennifer, hold on a moment. Have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy. I think the sun is out, so go enjoy it. All right. Have a good time. Take care.